Welcome to Rappler Talk. I am Ralph Rivas. Today, we're going to talk about the impact of the novel coronavirus to the business environment, particularly startups. Now, to talk more about that, we have Kubo Innovation Hub Director Katrina Chan. Hi, Katrina.
Hi, Ralph. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little more about Kubo first before we begin discussing the economy and the impact on startups.
Sure. And I'm glad you got that right. So Kubo actually stands for the Bahay Kubo. We're a technology startup platform, right? Like it's a whole program that's really all about supporting the Filipino tech startup ecosystem and growing it. It's a public-private kind of collaboration between the DOST and the DTI from the government side, and then Idea Space and JP Morgan, and hundreds of other private sector partners that are all aligned in wanting to develop and grow our tech startup ecosystem in the Philippines through Bayanihan. And that's why we're called Kubo. So, from humble beginnings, right, from a little Kubo, amazing startups can grow. That's really the whole kind of vision behind our organization.
Yeah, so speaking of startups, the Philippines is really such a it's a talk of the town in Asia basically before the pandemic. Lots of merger, lots of acquisitions, business deals here and there, and then the pandemic just changed all that. So tell us a little more about the situation now.
I mean, it's been tough for everyone across the board, right? Startups have always been inherently risky. Like, globally, they say something like 9 out of every 10 startups will fail, and the 10 that succeed, like they create the unicorns, right? The Facebooks of the world, or at least that's the goal. But the idea, even from the very beginning, was that it's tough to be a startup, to be trying something new, to be innovating on a business that no one's really tried or done before. And, like the entire pandemic has obviously also exposed the risk further, right? And a thriving innovation or startup economy is so key to the growth of any country, right? It's tied to so many of these metrics and how economies and GDPs grow in the long term. So it's so important that we pay special attention to our startups. We don't have that many in the Philippines. We probably have like under 1,000 all in all of these innovators and tech startups that are trying to do new things. But it's important that we kind of support them, especially now that it's such a transitional period for everybody.
Tell us a little more about where these startups are. What industries are they in?
I mean, there are startups working on practically every aspect of life, right? And in the Philippines, we've always been really strong in fintech and in services, and this is sort of an offshoot of the things that we've already been traditionally good at, in the service industry, right? In having some of the largest remittance corridors in the world. We were like pioneers in e-money and pasalod and all of these things, right? And these are traditions that we have been taken up by our startups also. But aside from that, right, we also have startups in tourism, in education, in logistics, in e-commerce, right? So the startups really kind of run across the spectrum of services that they cover. And Pinoys are very innovative and always trying to come up with new solutions to problems. So, and that was true before the pandemic, and now you're seeing even more of that innovation sort of come forward.
Well, I'm familiar that you did a survey about the impact of the coronavirus to startups. Now, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so every couple of years or so, Kubo, in partnership with PwC, actually conducts a startup survey that looks at the entire startup ecosystem and what our entrepreneurs are doing, right, and how they're doing. Obviously, we'd actually just released our 2020 survey in February, so this was like right before the pandemic really started, and we realized that with the pandemic, everything overnight, right, everything changed for everybody. So in April, we released an updated version of the survey that specifically looked at how the startups were responding to COVID-19, how their businesses were being affected, and what we were also really trying to understand was what type of support we needed to be providing, as a private sector, as a government, as a people, right, to be able to help our startups weather the storm. So, we did a survey with around 100 entrepreneurs, right, and startups, and explored some of these different areas. And you can find that report actually on the PwC website, and I can share some links with the audience if they're interested to check out the results of that survey as well.
Main points. What are the main points? What are the main things that you found out?
Well, for one, it's not all bad news. So actually, what we found also surprisingly or interestingly was that around the fifth of the startups, right, 20 something percent, the demand for their products and services actually grew like by a large amount as a result of the pandemic and all of the challenges that came with it. But then, as we had also expected, right, like for the 80% or for most startups, right, they did find the entire thing very challenging to cope with, right? In dealing with a few aspects, fundraising became especially difficult. Nobody wants to invest in a very risky business, especially at this time, right? Obviously, the disruptions in the labor force and sort of productivity, not being able to go to work or at least go to your office, right? Like that's caused a huge disruption in startups kind of lives. And then of course we also examined like how different industries that the startups were working in were kind of affected very differently. So you look at a tourism startup, right, where overnight nobody wanted to travel anymore, and we were just about to approach the busy summer season and very excited about that, right? And although in the other end of the spectrum, maybe you were a fledgling kind of grocery delivery startup, right, and then also overnight, whereas before it was maybe a very select kind of individual that was already got it and like ordering everything online, all of a sudden everyone was doing that, right? And the demand for your service just picked up like crazy. So yeah, it's definitely affected startups in very different ways. But I think the common thing that all startups do have is this, by nature they're innovative, they're entrepreneurial, they're trying to solve problems, right? And I think most startups have shown that they're willing and to try to at least pivot their business and kind of adapt to the situation now.
So you're saying that the winners, quote unquote, would be say delivery, fintech, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think organizations that are able to help people adapt and thrive in the new set of circumstances that we find ourselves in, right? So the digital economy is something that has grown. So you're right, fintech and allowing kind of digital payments is definitely one big chunk of it. But you're also looking at things like like again, logistics and e-commerce, right? And being able to purchase things online, and even taking it like a step back and like kind of bigger things, right? So education and sort of the online delivery of classes and things like that, to telehealth and telemedicine. Again, different aspects of our lives that have now been brought online. All of those things are definitely experiencing much bigger demand, and we foresee that will continue to happen even after the formal kind of lockdowns are over, right? So
We got the downside naman. So what are the most severely affected, negatively affected startups because of the pandemic?
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I think some industries are, find it harder to recover. Tourism, we're seeing it might take a while for that to bounce back, right? Or anything that involves sort of elective traveling or non-essential kind of traveling, concerts, all these sort of entertainment things that require some physical gathering. I think there's also generally hesitation for people to be purchasing kind of big items right now, right? Like committing to, let's say, buying a house or real estate or a car. So, if your company is particularly focused on these types of industries, it's a bit more challenging, right? Same goes with, a lot of our B2B startups are, also potentially struggling. And we're seeing that in the same way that consumers have a bit of hesitation, right? The same goes with businesses, right? So a lot of them, at least at the moment, right, are still sort of in, I want to say, survival mode, as opposed to how are we innovating or how are we kind of transforming ourselves, for 5 years in the future. So, again, there's a few setbacks there, but I think at the same time, right, you could also say that all of these things that are happening right now has only made it clearer to people that there is a need to adapt digital and transform your businesses to be more aligned. So I think longer term, there's still hope that that these startups will still be able to recover.
Now, for these struggling startups, did they say anything like ilang months na lang yung cash on hand nila? Up until what month can they survive this pandemic given the economic conditions?
Sure. You know, I don't want to. I mean, a lot of the detailed information is in that report that we published, but many startups will find it difficult to make it past this year, assuming nothing changes, right, without external additional funding or support, right? So a majority of startups do require money, especially in the shorter term, for working capital and to continue to invest in their technologies to be able to keep up with demand, even for the ones that are you would think are growing right now, right? So yeah, for sure. Like I think most of them are, have kind of gone through the runway. Most startups have, around 6 months of runway, like on hand, like in terms of how stable they are. But we could see a significant impact on our startups if we don't do anything, in the next 12 months, right? So that's really the time frame that we're looking at for a lot of these companies.
Yeah, so on the issue of bouncing back, Cubo has a proposal, right? Or a contest. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've always been supporting startups, and actually even now, like we continue with a lot of our digital programs, like coaching, mentoring, right, and several workshops that I do encourage all entrepreneurs to join in. They're all free and available online, right? But one thing that we are launching right now is the Rescue Startups versus COVID-19. That's rescue with a Q because we're Kubo with a
Cubo,
Q.
yeah.
Yeah. No, but so that program is actually in collaboration with Youth Business International and Google.org. So they have a rapid response and recovery program for entrepreneurs and startups that's happening around the world in like over 30 countries. And in the Philippines, Kubo is delivering that in part through this competition. We're actually selecting 10 startups, right, and looking at two very distinct and sort of important categories of startups that we want to support at the moment, right? So one is startups that have developed or have created a solution that can directly combat or help with COVID-19. So what does this mean, right? Like maybe you're an AI company that's, I don't know, helping DOH with contact tracing or with, identifying symptoms of, I mean, that's the innovator's job, right? But like all of these cool solutions that might help us for COVID-19, we definitely want to hear what your ideas are and support you in building them. And the second category of startups we're also looking at are, startups that have been able to, pivot their businesses sustainably, companies that we want to help existing entrepreneurs be able to continue their business, not just through the lockdowns, right? But to sustain this in the future. Like, so what are your solutions for the new normal, right? Like, or not just the new normal, but for the world after, this immediate crisis. And we're also really interested in supporting those companies as well. And for all of these startups, right, that get selected through this competition, we're looking at around 10 companies that will each get 100,000 pesos in cash to help them in building their products, right? Because basically in the survey, that's also what everyone said they needed. They needed money to continue with working capital and building on their products, right? But also with that comes like all of the support that Kubo already provides for our entrepreneurs, right? With additional mentoring from organizations like YBI, Youth Business International, and also Google, right? So they're gonna be volunteering their time and their services to really support the entrepreneurs and help them get through this, hopefully even stronger, right? So
Yes. So what
yeah.
do they need to show? Where do they send their entries or pitches?
Right. So basically, they have until the end of this month, so until June 30 to submit their entries. All they need to do is go on the Kubo website. It's kubo.com.ph/COVID-19. And there's a form there that they fill out. It's pretty simple, right? And we'll be screening the startups right after we close the deadline for applications. So again, it's a really, it's a really good opportunity, like no strings attached, it's equity free, right? But their intent is really to be able to support our startups at this time, and you know also have like a community of startups, right, in the Philippines, really working together also to solve our problems as a country, right? Like, so we can do this ourselves, we can build our solutions ourselves, we understand, right, how to get out of this better than anyone else can. So that's really the intent or the idea behind the rescue competition.
Now, just to wrap this interview up, now just tell us what are the main things that startups need at the moment to survive?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing everyone says is they need capital, right? But and to be able to continue to run their businesses, to run their experiments. And I think the easiest or the most important way for them to do that, right, is actually by having customers, like, that use their products and services. So I would really encourage, like, all the Pinoys or maybe even non-Pinoys out there, right, to try out like a local startup's products and services, right? Like when you need, for whatever it is that you might be needing right now in the pandemic, there's probably a startup out there that's hard at work building that solution for us, right? So, and what they really need is our attention and our support, and for us to be patronizing these products, right? And so they can get customers and they can continue to grow their businesses even now. So it doesn't mean that businesses has to stop or to be on pause, right? And it's actually an opportunity for maybe for everyone to try something new, something out that's new, right? So I mean, that's probably one way that we can all support our startups. Again, maybe I'll also briefly mention we actually have a website called supportstartups.com that's pretty straightforward, right? Where you can check out like some, even promo codes and discounts that our startups are offering for everybody right now, just to, also encourage them to try out the different services they have on offer. So it would be, I think, honestly, if I had to pick one thing that could help our startups right now, it's to continue to give them business, right? And then, apart from that, I think there are other, lots of organizations that are looking to help, right? Both in the government and in the private sector to support our small businesses across the board. But as individuals, using startups is probably the best thing that we can do.
Okay, thanks so much for your insights, Katrina Chan, Director of Cubo Innovation Hub. And I'm Ralph Rivas. Thanks for watching.